Hello students. In the previous video we have seen the dramatic persona of Romeo and Juliet and the source of the play and the brief story of the play Romeo and Juliet. And in this video we can start with the act wise summary, and in this particular video act 1 and act 2 we can see. Okay, so let us pass on to the act 1. First, coming from the prologue. The prologue. The scene is laid in Verona, where hostility between two families, survival of the clan spirit, breaks forth anew. The tragic ending of a pair of star-cast lovers springing from the two families puts an end to the strife. It is the theme of the play, lasting no more than 2 hours. The prologue craves the patient attention and indulge of the audience. Let us pass on to the scene 1. This scene opens at a public place in Verona. Samson and Gregory, servants of Capulet, are found the street carrying swords and bucklers. They seem to be itching for a quarrel. Abraham and Balthazar, retainers of Montague, are out too in the street. When these hostiles meet, they start a row. Benvolio, a nephew to Montague and friend to Romeo, turns up there. He wants to keep the peace between the quarrelling parties and intervenes. Then there a Tybalt nephew to Lady Capulet. He is of a fiery spirit and provokes Benvolio into fight. Now other citizens are drawn into the fray. Capulet and Lady Capulet, Montague and Lady Montague appear in the scene. Lastly come Prince Escalus with his train. He sternly reprimands Capulet and Montague for the breach of peace and summons them to council to know his further pleasure. The citizens now disperse, and Montague, Lady Montague and Benvolio are left there. Benvolio tells them that he found the two parties fighting, and when he attempted to part them, Tybalt came upon him with his sword drawn, and that the prince at last came and stopped the fray. Now we hear of Romeo as reported to Benvolio when Lady Montague inquires about him. Benvolio met him early in the morning, but Romeo seemed to shun him, and Benvolio did not thrust his company upon him. Montague is aware that Romeo keeps in his chamber, shunning of company, and seems to be nursing morbid aloofness, and that he is not going to tell anybody what troubles him. In the meantime, Romeo appears there. Montague and Lady Montague withdraw, leaving Benvolio to tackle Romeo. Benvolio questions Romeo whether he is in love. Romeo replies that he is out of love, or rather the favor of her love. He speaks of the contradiction of love-hate, and the agony and oppression of the heart he suffers in consequence. It appears that the woman he loves is non-responsive and seems to be repelling him, and this is the cause of his unhappiness. Benvolio advises him to forget her and let his eyes range over other beauties. It is an advice more easily given than followed, for Romeo confesses that he is almost infatuated in love. Let us pass on to scene 2. Capulet is holding a feast, a customary one as it is. he invites Paris to the feast. Paris offers himself a candidate for Juliet's hand. Capulet is not willing to many of Juliet at such as early age. She is not yet 14. While all his hopes are centered on her, he thinks that she will be marriageable age 2 years hence. However, he permits Paris to woo her and promises his consent if Juliet is agreeable. Paris will meet the beauties of Verona at the feast he is holding, and among them will be Juliet. Paris can have his own choice if he is so inclined. Capulet orders his servant to seek out those who have been invited and whose names appear on the list. When Capulet and Paris are gone, Benvolio and Romeo enter. Benvolio still advises Romeo to seek a new love in the place of the old one. Romeo does not believe in it. Capulet's servant now approaches Romeo and begs him to read out the names written in the list. He reads out the names, among which appears the name of Rosalind. The servant goes about his business while Benvolio and Romeo are there. Benvolio suggests to Romeo that he should go to Capulet's feast, where he can compare Rosalind with the beauties of Verona. And he assembled there with the chance of being disillusioned. Romeo cannot believe that the beauty he worships will be eclipsed by any. However, he is willing to go to the feast for nothing else than to find his lady shining there in all the splendor of beauty. This is the scene 2. Let us pass on to the scene 3. Lady Capulet wants to broach marriage to Juliet, whom the nurse summons. First, Lady Capulet dismisses the nurse and then bids her stay. The nurse begins to talk about Juliet's age and goes back into the days of her early girlhood. She will be 14 next Lammas. The nurse recalls that her daughter, not living no more, was the same age. She remembers that Julius was weaned 11 years ago when an earthquake occurred, and the process by which she was weaned, and that she recalls the incident when Juliet about that time fell and broke her brow, and also the remark of her husband. You will fall backward when you have more will, and Juliet's reply to it, yes. And the nurse has a good laugh at it, especially at Juliet's reply. Lady Capulet has to stop her gabbling. The nurse still goes on and says that Juliet was the prettiest babe she has ever nursed and wishes to see her married. So Lady Capulet has her opportunity. She asks her daughter whether she is disposed to marry. She replies that it is an honor she does not dream of yet. The nurse adds her persuasion to Lady Capulet. Lady Capulet was married about the same age, and tells Juliet that Paris seeks her hand, and the nurse starts praising Paris. In any case, as Lady Capulet tells Juliet, she is going to meet Paris at the feast that night and can fairly study him and discover his merits, which need to be supplemented by Juliet being united with him in marriage. Juliet replies that she will have a look at Paris and see if she can like him, but she will go no further at present, Now a serving man enters to tell Lady Capulet that the guests have arrived, supper is ready, the young lady Juliet is waited for, and the nurse is wanted in the pantry. This is scene 3. Let us pass on to the scene 4. Act 1, scene 4. Romeo, Benvolio and Mercutio are on their way to Capulet's feast. Benvolio suggests that they should do without any ceremony. No prologue, as Romeo suggests, which introduces a party of maskers. Such ceremony is out of date, says Benvolio. Romeo would like to be a torch bearer. He is heavy with his grief and he is no good for dancing. Mercutio suggests that since he is in the grip of love, he should borrow Cupid's wings and soar. Romeo pleads that he is sinking under love's heavy burden. Mercutio advises Romeo to be rough with love and beat it down. Mercutio asks for a visor to put on and Romeo asks for a torch. He will be a torch bearer and look on and take no part in the games. If he is stuck in the mire of love, Mercutio offers to drag him out. Romeo is in doubt whether they are doing the right thing in going to the feast, for he dreamt a dream that night. It sets Mercutio talking on Queen Mab, whom he describes in all details, in shape no bigger than an agate stone drawn by a team of atomies. Across men's noses they lie asleep. Her wagon spokes being made of spiders' legs, the cover of the wings of grasshoppers, the traces of the smallest spider's web, her collars of the rays of moonlight, her whip of cricket bone and the lash of film, her wagoner being a small grey coated knot, and her chariot an empty hazelnut. In all her glory, she sweeps every night through the brains of lovers, and they dream of love, settles on courtiers' knees, and they dream and the ladies' lips, and they dream of kisses. Sometimes she rides across a courtier's nose, and he dreams of another benefice, or drives across a soldier's neck, and he dreams to cutting the throats of foreigners, of breachers, ambuscades, Spanish blades, a deep heaths, and suddenly starts at the sound of drums, waking up and then addressing a prayer, or two falls asleep again. Queen Mab tangles into knots in the means of horses at night by drooping wax on them, and when they are unknotted, it is an evil omen. She makes the maids bear children. Romeo gets impatient and begs him to stop. Mercutio is talking of nothing. So Mercutio says dreams are children of an ideal brain, beget of nothing but vain fantasy. Benvolio tells them that it is getting late and they must hurry into the feast. Romeo's mind misgives. This night is going to set on foot a course of events that even and fatality for him. It will be the end of a despised life, but he leaves it to him who guides the course of his life. This is scene 4. Let us pass on to the scene 5. It opens with the conversation between servants who are busy clearing the hay for a dance. Then Capulet enters with Juliet and others of the house. Capulet welcomes the guests and invites them to dance, particularly addressing himself to the ladies and twitting those who are coy and reserved. He recalls his younger days when he wore a mask and whispered a tale of love in a fair lady's ear. Those days are now no more. He welcomes the gentlemen and bids the musicians play. Then the dance begins. Capulet turns to his cousin, an elderly gentleman, and regrets that his dancing days are no more. His cousin, second Capulet, tells him that it must have been 30 years or so. Capulet thinks that he is 25 years when he masked that lost at the marriage of Lucentio. Romeo now happens to notice Juliet, and a servant too, whom he turns for information, cannot tell him who the lady is. His rich and resplendent beauty eclipses everything, and Romeo is amazed. He is ready to forswear her old love. Tybalt, hearing this voice, suspects him to be a Montague, for he cannot see his face, which is masked. Tybalt is ready to draw his sword upon him and rages and fumes. But Capulet would not let him do any violence to a Montague, even when he is told that it is that villain Romeo. Capulet rather praises him unstinted, a virtuous and well-governed youth, as he is reputed to be in Verona. In no case will be permit any affront or violence done him in his house. Capulet chides Tybalt into peace. Romeo approaches Juliet and takes her hand, saying that he profanes the holy shrine with his unworthiest hand, which he can amend with a tender kiss, for which his lips like two blushing pilgrims. Two pilgrims crave. Juliet, taking up his figure, calls him a good pilgrim and accept the devotion as offered by his hand, and says that a holy palmer pilgrims kiss the joining of palms. Romeo agrees that the palmer have lips. Juliet replies that lips must be used in prayer. After all, Juliet permits him to kiss her. Then nurse comes to call away Juliet. Her mother is waiting for her when Juliet leaves him. Romeo asks the nurse who her mother is, and learns that she is the mistress of the house. It is his fate to be in love with the very Capulet. The guests are now leaving. Capulet thanks them all and bids them good night, while he bids his servants for more light. Juliet watches them departing and sends the nurse to find out who the gentleman that addressed her lately is. She learns that it is Romeo, and she curses her fate. My only love sprung from my only hate. This is Act 1. Let us pass on to Act 2, the prologue. The prologue of Act 2. Romeo's old love is now replaced by a new one. The one Rosalind whom he loved before, compared with Juliet, seems no longer beautiful. Now Romeo, who has been lately repulsed, loves, and he is loved in return. And then again, the lady whom he loves now is more attractive. But it will have to be stolen love for both, for they come from rival families, and they may not have free access to each other, the means of the lady being more restricted still. Their course of love will be a hazardous one, and love defies all restrictions, and they will manage to meet and have their sweet will. This is the prologue of Act 2, and let us pass on to Scene 1. Act 2, Scene 1. Romeo scales the wall and gets into Capulet's garden. Benvolio and Mercutio appear there at the same moment. Mercutio shouts after Romeo and jests with the love with which Romeo is afflicted. There is no response from Romeo, who is within the garden. Then Mercutio feigns to conjure Romeo, for he is dead now. He appears to Romeo by Rosalind's bright eyes, high forehead, and rosy lips, etc. Benvolio is afraid that the way Mercutio is conjuring Romeo may anger him if he hears it. He is conjuring him in the name of his mistress, and no use calling Romeo, who has hidden himself among the trees, preferring to associate with darkness, since love is blind. If love is blind, Mercutio says, then Romeo will miss the mark. So they say good night to the unseen Romeo and depart. Let us pass on to the Scene 2, Act 2, Scene 2. Romeo of Capulet's garden looks up at the window, and Juliet is there. Juliet looks like the sun in the east, putting the envious moon to shame. He desires her to be no more the moon's maid and cast off her vestal livery. He thinks that she is going to speak. Her eyes seem to discourse. Two stars going on some business beg her eyes to shine in their spheres till they return. If they do, the birds would make up and burst into song as if it were no more night. The Romeo sees Juliet resting her cheek upon her hand at the window. Then Romeo overhears Juliet speaking. She seems to be like a winged messenger of heaven, to whom the wondering eyes of mortals are looking up. Juliet cries upon the name of Romeo and begs him to renounce his name or be her sworn love, and she will no longer be a Capulet. It is his name which is her enemy, she says. But what does a name signify? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Romeo now replies that if she would but call him her love, he would renounce his name and be rebaptized. Juliet recognizes him by his voice. She warns him of the risk he is running by entering the garden. It will be death to him if any of her kinsmen finds him there. Romeo replies that if she is sweet to him, he will defy and enmity of her kinsmen. In fact, there is more peril in her eyes than in their swords. Unless she loves him, he will prefer to lose his life at the hand of his enemy. It is now the turn of Juliet to probe his love. It will not do for her to be formal at this stage. To her question whether he loves her, she knows that his answer will be yes. But how she is to know that he will not prove false? He may think that she has been too lightly won. If so, she will hold herself off and set him wooing her diligently. But she freely and frankly confesses her love for him, even at the risk of being misinterpreted. Okay. Going to do. He should rather sweeter, as Juliet says, by his gracious self which she worships, and then she will believe him. Then she bids him not to swear at all. Their love, she thinks, has been rather rash, unadvised, and sudden. She is going to bid him good night, hoping they will all have a better chance when they meet again. But Romeo complains that he is being left unsatisfied. He desires the exchange of her love's faithful vow for his. Juliet replies that she had already given him her love before her sued for it, and wishes that she could give it over and over again. For her bounty is as boundless as sea, and her love as deep. The nurse begins to call Juliet. She withdraws for a moment and then reappears. She asks of Romeo that if his love is horrible, and if he intends marriage, he should send a sword the next day. She is going to send her messenger to him, and he can inform her when and where the marriage will be performed. The nurse goes on calling her. Again she withdraws. She is again at the window calling upon Romeo. She wants to know at what time she can send her messenger. Romeo tells her that it should be the hour of 9. They part when it is almost morning. This is the scene 2. Let us pass on to the scene 3. Friar Lawrence hails the dawn and begins to collect herbs when Romeo visits him. It is so early, and Lawrence naturally infers that Romeo has not been in bed and that he is troubled in spirit. Romeo confirms his suspicion, but adds that he had the sweeter rest. He tells the friar that he did not spend the night with Rosalind. However, in fact, he has renounced her, which the friar is surprised to hear. He goes on saying that at the feast of his enemy, he was wounded by one whom he too had wounded, for which he now desires the friar's aid. The friar asks him to be more plain and explicit. Now Romeo tells him that he is in love with the daughter of Capulet and desires of him, and he should unite them in marriage that very day. The quick change in his love makes the friar think that with the young, love is a matter of the eyes and not of the heart. The salt tears for Rosalind are not yet dry on his cheeks, and groans still ring in the friar's ears, and now it has given up Rosalind. How is that? Asks the friar. In this excuse, Romeo replies that he was often chided by him for loving Rosalind. The friar could never have rebuked him for loving, but for doting, and Romeo pleads that he is now loved in return. While he loved Rosalind, Rosalind did not love him. The friar agrees to assist him, for he thinks that after all, this alliance might put an end to the hostility between the two families. Let us pass on to the scene 4. The scene 4 Benvolio and Mercutio are out in the street, looking for Romeo. Romeo had not been home last night. Benvolio informs Mercutio that Tybalt has sent a challenge to Romeo. Mercutio is very much worried about Romeo's distraction with love. He describes the kind of duelist that Tybalt is, a stickler on form to a fantastic degree. Soon Romeo appears and Mercutio comments on his love, outbidding all legendary love. Romeo and Mercutio go on paring each other in exchange of wit. Romeo excuses himself for running away from them last evening. It is about courtesy that they start jesting. Mercutio claims to be at the very pink of courtesy, from which they pass on to a flowered pump with the single soul worn out. And Romeo remarks that it is a single-sided jest, singular for its singleness. Mercutio confesses that he cannot cope with Romeo in this encounter of wits and appeals to Benvolio for aid. It is all a wild goose chase, Romeo retorts by pinning Mercutio down to the goose. But he is glad to see that Romeo is getting lively in exercise of wit and is from his drivelling love, Romeo in himself again. This gladdens Mercutio's heart. At this moment enters the nurse, accompanied by Peter. They are amused by the ostentation of the nurse. The nurse is annoyed by the jokes that Mercutio cracks with her. She desires a private talk with Romeo. Mercutio and Benvolio leave the two alone. The nurse appears to be highly offended by Mercutio's treating her so lightly. She could have taught him a lesson and turns to Peter in wrath for standing by idly while the fellow insulted her. Then she addresses herself to Romeo. She is not sure whether he is going to deceive her lady, which would be gross behavior on his part. Romeo protests against the initiation. Then he tells the nurse to convey his lady from him, that she should come to Shrift that afternoon, and that at Friar Lawrence's call they are going to be married. He asks her to wait behind the abbey veil, where his man will bring a rope ladder to be used by him that night to get into Juliet's bedchamber. The nurse incidentally informs Romeo that Paris was a candidate for her lady's hand, but she cannot stand him. The nurse then takes leave of him and departs with Peter. Next we pass on to the scene 5. The scene 5, Juliet sends the nurse to Romeo at 9. It is 12 now and the nurse has not returned, and Juliet gets impatient. Love's messengers, she says, should be as quick as thought. She wishes that as quick as her words, her messenger could reach her love, and in the same way his messenger too could come to her. Now the nurse appears with Peter. Peter, sent away Juliet, demands news of the nurse impatiently. She talks of this and that, withholding the news of the end. She wears a sad face, begs to have a little rest, complains of her aching bones. Juliet begs her to speak out, whether the news is good or bad. The nurse keeps her waiting and comments her choice of Romeo and begins to praise Romeo for his physical and mental accomplishment. Then she seeks Juliet, where she has denied at home and where her mother is. Juliet patiently answers her imitating questions and waits for the news. The nurse complains now of a spitting headache and the pain in the back. At last she comes out with the news. If Juliet has time to go to Shrift that day, she will find a husband waiting for her at Friar Lawrence's cell. Then she adds that she is going to fetch a rope ladder which will admit Romeo to her bedchamber. This is scene 5. Let us pass on to the scene 6 of Act 2. Friar Lawrence invokes the blessing of heaven on the wedding of Romeo and Juliet, at which he is going to officiate. Romeo has still his 4 beddings. All that he wishes is that they should be until in wedlock. Then it does not matter to him if death follows upon it. He will be satisfied if he can call her his own. Lawrence cautions him that violent delights have violent ends and beseeches him to loving moderation. Then Juliet appears and Lawrence comments that she is quick-footed enough and that a lover may bestride the gossamer and vanity is as light as that. Romeo begs Juliet to sweeten the air with her breath if her measure of happiness is as full as his own. Juliet replies that words are poorer to the imagination, which is richer in substance, and pleads that her love is grown to such excess that she cannot sum it up. Lawrence invited them, for he would waste little time in uniting them in marriage. So this is it. So in this video we have seen the Act 1 and Act 2 scene wise summary. Thank you. Thank you one and all. Thank you.